Now let us understand the method of quasi-experimental design. The quasi or semi-experimental designs are experimental designs where the allocation of treatment is not random. This type of research design aims to establish a cause and effect relationship between an independent and dependent variable. In comparison to other methods such as experimental or randomized controlled trial, the quasi-experimental designs are less robust. The control and treatment in this method are also not randomly distributed, which might give rise to bias. In this method of research design, various techniques are used to create a counterfactual, depending on the stage of program implementation and data availability. The difference in difference method is a quasi-experimental approach that compares the changes in outcomes over time between a treatment group that is part of a program and the comparison group that is outside of the program. This method involves comparing two groups, one that receives a treatment and another that does not, before and after an intervention takes place. The difference in difference outcomes between the two groups is then analyzed to determine the impact of the intervention. The outcomes of both groups before and after the intervention are also compared to see if there was any change over time. To conduct the study, it requires at least two cross-sections of data pre-programmed on treatment and control groups. Finally, difference in difference cleans all time-varying factors such as selection bias from the first difference by subtracting the second difference from it. To have a clearer understanding of the concept, let's take an example of estimating the use of technology in increasing learning gains. First, let's assume that instead of randomly selecting students, every student of one school, let's say A, was given the content-loaded tablet. In this case, you do not have a proper counterfactual. Therefore, you randomly select some students for school A and some others for school B, which you believe shares some similar characteristics. Now, we need to establish a pre-post design in both cases. There's another approach to quasi-experimental research known as matching. This approach requires both the representative and comparable data for the treatment and comparison groups. The propensity score or probability score of the two samples based on the selected observable characteristics needs to be calculated. We need to restrict the sample to the units where common support appears in the propensity score distribution. For each enrolled unit, one has to locate a subgroup of non-enrolled units with similar propensity scores. When we compare the outcome of the treatment group with their matched comparison group, we will be able to find the difference in the average outcomes of the subgroups, and that it is the measure of the impact that can be attributed to the program. The mean of these individual impacts yields the estimated average treatment. Let us understand the concept of PSM by looking at this fictitious scenario to understand its implications. The table implies the scenario which has resulted in the following implications while taking into account the indicator of the households in treatment areas against the comparison areas. Regression discontinuity is another approach of quasi-experimental research. It is an approach that is used for programs that use a continuous variable to index, to rank potential participants in a program. This method can be used when there is some kind of criterion that must be met before people can participate in the intervention being evaluated. There is a cutoff point or threshold along the variable which is used to determine the eligibility criteria, that is, whether a potential participant receives the program. For example, the poverty score or index generated based on the HH assets to deciding PPL households, pension programs based on retirement age cutoff. Here, the candidates just below the cutoff point are like the candidates just above the cutoff point. So, it can be treated as the control group. Now let us understand what Regression Discontinuity Design, RDD, is. It is an impact evaluation method that can be used for programs that have a continuous eligibility index with a clearly defined eligibility threshold. It determines who is eligible and who is not. For a researcher to use this approach efficiently for a study, they must be mindful of meeting the following conditions. The index must rank people or units in a continuous or smooth way. The index must have a clearly defined cutoff score, that is, a point on the index above or below which the population is classified as eligible for the program. The cutoff must be unique to the program of interest, that is, there should be no other programs apart from the program to be evaluated that uses the same cutoff score. The score of a particular individual or unit cannot be manipulated by enumerators, potential beneficiaries, program administrators, or politicians.